Hey all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. As always, this is the first Monday of the month, and so I'm going to cover another set of females in the MMIW cases. Of course, there are thousands upon thousands, so picking out a few is never an easy task, but let's get started, shall we? Abigail Andrews, or Abby, was born on February 7th, 1982, to parents Debbie and Doug Andrews in Fort Nelson, British Columbia. She had a sister, but I wasn't able to find out if she was an older or younger one. Her family moved to Duncan, British Columbia, and then to Tetsa River, about 75 miles north of Fort Nelson, when Abigail was in her early teen years. Quote, her mom and dad took over running a family lodge that's there, the Cinnamon Bun Center, end quote, Abigail's aunt, Beth Cobbett, said. According to Energetic City, Abigail and her sister then moved into Fort Nelson and worked there for a few years before Abigail decided to travel, spending a few years in England, and then moved back to Montreal, where she met her friend Carrie Connolly while working at a call center. They became fast friends, then roommates. According to Carrie, Abby helped raise her son for over a year during the time of living together, before her move to Fort St. John in June of 2009. At that time, she became a cook for an oil field, and it sounds like the workers enjoyed eating the fruits of her labor. Soon, Abby realized she was pregnant, and family reported that she was excited, although her father seemed not to be. Abby's family hoped that he would get on board prior to the baby's arrival, however. Shortly before April, Carrie stated that, quote, she was a little fearful of situations that were going on. I went to her house maybe a week before her disappearance, and she was cautious about making sure who was at the door and then looking out on the street. She was just a little freaked out about some stuff, and she didn't expound on it. I wish I had queried her more about what was going on, end quote. According to CBC News, in early 2010, Abigail Andrews, a 28-year-old at the time, was an expectant mother of her first child. Abigail was described as 6 feet tall and weighing approximately 200 pounds. She had long, dark brown hair, hazel eyes, and a tribal tattoo on her lower back. The Matisse woman worked at FSJ Fashions and the Frontier Bar and Grill in Fort St. John, British Columbia, before she vanished. She last spoke with her mother around 7 p.m. on the night of April 7th, then told neighbors she was going to go visit a male friend. She was last seen walking home from her friend's house. Her father said, it's out of character for her to lose touch, and she disappeared with only the clothes she was wearing, which at the time was noted to be a white shirt with a dark blue or black vest, a pair of black pants, and the black mid-length belted trench coat with a pair of black sequin flats, her purse, and phone. No transactions were ever made with her bank card after she disappeared. Also, at the time, she had breast implants and again that tattoo on her back. She also had a crooked index finger on her right hand due to a previous injury. After a missing persons report was filed, the Fort St. John's RCMP and its General Duty Section conducted a search for Abigail. Abby's story was broadcast by local and national media to the general public. On April 20th, 2010, a search was conducted at the North Peace landfill, located just outside of Fort St. John, by the RCMP, the BC Coroner's Office, and a forensic anthropologist. However, no news came of this. In June of 2010, Abby's loved ones conducted a search around Abby's apartment and an area outside of Fort St. John, but again, nothing. That same month, along the Alaska Highway in Hope, British Columbia, Beth Cabot arranged to have 2 billboards erected with large photos of Abby, her physical description, and phone numbers for the public to call if they had any information or tips. But still, years went on, and Abby's friends began to run letter campaigns to get her case featured on The Fifth Estate, a CBC investigative show. Then, in 2013, the RCMP uploaded a reenactment video of Abby's disappearance on their YouTube channel in hopes it would bring in new information or leads to go off of. At the same time, they also admitted to having a suspect whose name they didn't publicly disclose. And even though there's a suspect, authorities still didn't have certain information they needed in order to close this investigation. And according to the RCMP, several searches had been conducted based on tips gathered from the public. Still, no new information has been discovered. And as of now, Abby's case remains a missing persons case, although the RCMP Provincial Series Crime Unit is investigating it as a homicide. On the 15th anniversary, Energetic City reported that the Fort St. John Métis Society described the Andrews story as a, quote, deeply sensitive situation, end quote. Quote, the fact that a local Indigenous woman went missing is deeply troubling to us, end quote, wrote the Society via email. Quote, it speaks to the larger systemic issues that continue to impact Indigenous communities across Canada. We stand in solidarity with all families who are seeking justice and answers for their loved ones, end quote. And that is all the information that we have on Abigail Andrews. Ada Brown. Ada Elaine Brown was the youngest of 8 siblings from the Tahltan First Nation in Telegraph Creek, British Columbia. The 41-year-old was a mother of 2 at the time. On April 9, 2001, her body was found in a hotel room in Prince George, British Columbia. According to documents obtained from the British Columbia's coroner's office, she died from a, quote, subdural hemorrhage, end quote, and complications from alcoholism. However, even though the postmortem mentioned previous assaults and it even noted that Brown had 2 black eyes when she died, the coroner's office determined that, quote, is classified as undetermined, end quote. Quote, it was even before the autopsy was concluded, and that's what they told my sister, end quote, said Terry Brown, one of Ada's older sisters, along with, quote, I don't think there was much of an investigation, end quote. What the family has been told is that their sister went to a doctor to treat a headache. Instead of a proper examination, Ada was sent home with only Tylenol after 2 visits, and these are following assaults from a female. On the 3rd day, Ada died, but it wasn't until the family received Ada's body that they noticed she was black and blue around her face and eyes. Again, the autopsy report says Ada had been assaulted by an unknown female downtown. It also stated that there was, quote, unsubstantiated history of an assault 5 days prior to her death, end quote. Because of its circumstances, that is why she is undetermined. The family continues to believe, however, that a man Ada knew was responsible for her death, as this man was extremely abusive towards her, according to Sister Terry. Quote, he was known as a shady guy, the street guy, the drugs. He was really known to be really mean to her, to beat her. She told my older sisters a lot of this, end quote. Terry also said, quote, she said it herself, if I ever die, it's because of him, end quote. The RCMP's E-Division told CBC News that once they reviewed the file in consultation with the British Columbia Coroner's Office and the family members, they'd be able to provide more information. However, none has come at this time. And it should be noted that a subdural hematoma could have definitely come from a fight or an assault, whether it be that female or an unknown male. If it was the female and she's known, she should have been prosecuted. If it was an unknown male or a male known within the family, that information should have been brought to light. And it definitely should have been investigated because hematomas are known to grow and obviously, as in this case, can start out small and end in the death of somebody. So this definitely feels like a homicide, not undetermined. Aaliyah Sarek Auger was born in 1991 and lived in Prince George, British Columbia with her family. Aaliyah was the youngest of 6 children, and despite moving around frequently and sometimes being separated for periods of time, she, her siblings, and her mother remained a close-knit unit. On Thursday, February 2nd, 2006, 14-year-old Aaliyah and her sister Kyla and her brother Tim went to the Pine Center Mall, which was about 4 kilometers from their home, just to spend the day shopping and hanging out. Normal teenage activity. At the mall, Aaliyah and Kyla ran into some friends and decided that they should go out drinking for the night. Tim, however, did not want to go, but Aaliyah and Kyla went together. During the night out, however, the two were separated, and Kyla arrived home early the next morning, but Aaliyah did not. The family spent the entire day waiting for her to come home and began retracing steps from the night before. 4 days later, on February 6, Audrey Auger, Aaliyah's mother, went to the police and reported her daughter missing. And now, I see reports of this saying February 6, but I've also seen reports where she went and reported her missing and was told that she needed to wait 78 hours to see if she would return, and that's why the days went by. Her family still continued on. They plastered missing posters all over downtown Prince George. And on February 10th, unfortunately, a passing motorist traveling east to Prince George on Highway 16 found a nude body lying at the base of the highway embankment. Police determined that Aaliyah had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Her case continues to be investigated by Project E-PANA, a task force dedicated to unsolved murders with links to Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert, again otherwise known as the Highway of Tears. Alana Jemima Cardinal was one of 9 children in her family. She was a member of the Whitefish, or Goodfish, Lake First Nation, a Cree community located about 185 kilometers northeast of Edmonton, Alberta. Growing up, Alana was said to be an outgoing and smart girl who was very friendly to everyone she met. She was also, at the time of her incident, a mother to a 4-year-old daughter. Shortly before her disappearance and death, the 20-year-old Alana had received an acceptance letter from Portage College in Alberta. She disappeared on July 16, 2016. A few days later, on July 21st, Alana was officially reported missing to authorities. To help try and find her, the St. Paul detachment of the RCMP sent out a public notice for assistance in trying to locate her, which featured her description. 9 days after she was last seen, Alana's remains were discovered near her home community by the RCMP, local volunteers, and search and rescue personnel. Alana's death was classified a suicide by the coroner, but her family doesn't believe she took her own life. Alana's grandmother reported, quote, "She was planning on going to school in the fall," end quote. She said, adding that Alana Cardinal was one of 9 children, quote, "and we were planning on where to send her daughter to school," end quote. In this case, the reason that she was labeled a suicide is that her significant other and the father of her child was unfortunately killed prior to this incident in an accident, resulting in some mental health difficulties. However, family believes that this letter to go to college had led to increased excitement and plans for the future, and she simply wouldn't have left her daughter behind. Alberta Gail Williams was born on February 26, 1965. Kitimat-Stikine Regional District in British Columbia, Canada. By all accounts, she was close with her family. In 1989, the 24-year-old was living with her sister in a downtown Vancouver apartment for the summer, taking on seasonal work in northern British Columbia throughout the summer. On August 25th, 1989, their last weekend there, they decided to celebrate. They went to a pub with a group of people who had been working at the same seasonal cannery that summer, and at closing time, had a brief conversation. Quote, "The last thing she said to me was, Claudia, come with me. We're going to a house party." I said, "Where?" And I turned around, talked to somebody for a second, and she disappeared. So did the whole crowd of people that were sitting at the table, end quote. On September 25, 1989, her body was found on the outskirts of Prince Rupert, British Columbia. Investigators at the time said she was sexually assaulted and strangled. In 2006, her death was added to Project EPANA, the police task force that investigates disappearances and murders along British Columbia's Highway of Tears. In 2016, her story was part of an 8-episode CBC podcast called Missing and Murdered by Connie Walker. The podcast revealed some new information that was never used by the RCMP, which included a witness who was never interviewed by police. And in July of 2017, Alberta's brother, Francis Williams, created a memorial where her body was found in hopes that it will help someone come forward. Still, her case is considered unsolved. And last, but certainly not least, I'm going to cover something that's going to take about 30 seconds because in many of these cases for the MMIW women, it is difficult to find information or at least new information. So, in this case, well, all of these cases again cite a lack of information or minimal information. This one is abysmal. Alice Quokot was a mother of 5 sons and 1 daughter. She was from Lac Seul First Nation near Seal Lookout, Ontario. She was murdered in Thunder Bay in the late 1970s, and after her death, her children were placed into adoption centers. And that is it. Her nephew Harvey spoke later about the day she was found, going to identify her with her mother, but key information about this case is difficult, if not feel impossible to find. But that's the reason that these are all MMIW cases. We don't always have the answers to them. But they are egregious and they are enormous and they need to be heard. And so we'll continue on next month with even more. But for now, until next time, be careful. It really is a dangerous world we live in.